Good afternoon. Good afternoon, community, and welcome to the ABC Collective's presentation of an HR strategy for risk-balanced DEI messaging. I am proud and honored to be the chair of the 2025 ABC Collective Committee this year. And the committee members are comprised of our NHRA Orange County Representative, Monica Pleasant, who is also serving as our moderator today, our collective affairs strategists, Stephanie Hammerworld and Marisa Stoltzfus, our community of practice leaders, Patty Trujillo and Liseth Zubani, our strategic insights advisors, Dr. Mayra Austin and Dr. Sarah Koo, our engagement liaison, Marc Brown, our Maritai, Andrew Agris and Lalita Nordquist, and our advisors, Jerry Gonzalez and Hannah Suisse. Today, we're going to be discussing very briefly the assembly of our new team and purpose, our new logo, our mission, vision, and values, and then NHRA's evolution on the topic of DEI. So let's get started. Very briefly, let me read for you our ABC Collective overview. We're a dedicated group of volunteer professionals committed to advocacy, belonging, and culture, or ABC, within our organization and the communities that we serve. The collective's mission is to foster a collaborative environment where diverse perspectives are embraced, equitable practices are promoted, and accessibility is prioritized in every initiative. Guided by a shared purpose, we strive to be a catalyst for positive change, strengthening the connection between individuals and the larger community. That's a lot, but I will tell you that our overarching purpose is this: to build an inclusive culture where all members feel valued, respected, and empowered to contribute fully. Through intentional action, the collective aims to inspire engagement, drive learning, and facilitate meaningful discussions that promote understanding and connection. And to that last part, I am so pleased and honored to have as our special guest panelist, Ms. Amber Micala, Arnold with Mike Worldwide. She is a professional in the space, helping people specifically with risk balanced DEI messaging. And I met her at the Great Place to Work conference this past April in Las Vegas. She was sitting there looking very studious and regal and friendly and welcoming and inviting. And we struck up a conversation and we engaged afterwards. And after getting to know her for about 20 minutes, I said, we're having a webinar coming up and I would love to have you there as our subject matter expert, helping us all figure this out. The diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging, accessibility conversation has not only changed from difficult to different, but now it's really, really complicated. Some people are concerned as to whether or not they should even be having the conversation, and if they are, what that conversation is looking like. As for me, when I've been working with my clients, I've been helping them to understand that if you're really serious about retiring the term DEI, but rewiring the work, then let's do it by leaning into your corporate values. And if your corporate values are not such that you can demonstrate them in a way that causes folks to feel a sense of belonging, then that's a really good place to start. So with that in mind, this is why this collective decided to hold this particular webinar, because we understand that right now the dialogue may be forced if it's happening at all. And if it's happening without you, that's something that you really want to pay attention to because it is happening. So we want to help you become comfortable with the discomfort that comes when your awareness is raised. Oftentimes we confuse discomfort with a bad thing, but discomfort can simply mean it's time to maybe rethink my stance on some things and my approach to some things. And most importantly, how I can deliver a message that will be received versus delivering a message that I feel is right. So that being said, here is where we are today. I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Monica Pleasant, and we will take the conversation from there. Monica.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anita, and thank you again for all of you who took the time to join us today for this webinar on a very important topic. For the person who's driving the slides, can we please go to slide 6? Wonderful. So I would like for each of the members of our ABC Collective to share a little bit about yourself and the topic that you are appointed to speak to. Let's start with Stephanie.
Yeah, my name's Stephanie Hammerworld. I am the Director of Talent and Culture, and I head up HR here at the Skirball Cultural Center. Also, a little plug for the NHRA LA Executive of the Year event, which will be here on or in September. And we're always excited to host that here every year. I've worked in HR for over 20 years in everything from manufacturing, distribution, grocery, small business consulting, tech startup, and now have landed in this museum space. I also do a lot of advocacy work on the side with an organization where I volunteer, the California Coalition for Women Prisoners. So as we get into this idea of advocacy in a moment, it's very near and dear to me, whether it is here at the Skirball or how I do that in my volunteer work. And I've recently joined the ABC Collective, probably at the end of 2024, and looking forward to sharing the wisdom of this amazing group of people with all of you. So next slide, please. So my area is advocacy. This is that first letter in ABC Collective. This is really simple. So public support for a decision, a cause, a policy, or case that can take every form from showing up and marching in the street, social media campaigns, letters and calls and emails to politicians, to other leaders. But I want to talk today specifically about what that means for us here in HR. And that's speaking up in our organizations, advocating for our employees, getting a strong sense, which I know as HR professionals, a lot of you have a very strong sense from talking to your employees about what their needs are. And we're often an in-between, an intermediary with the rest of the leadership team to speak up on behalf of that team of employees. And so talking about, when it comes to DEI, that's become a very kind of bad word in the current climate in a lot of ways, is talking about how is your organization already doing this? What are the ways that this is so deeply embedded in your culture that it continues to be just part of how you exist as an organization and how you treat people? And so I think speaking up and having those, conversations, as Dr. Anita mentioned, and Amber had mentioned this in conversation too, what does it mean as an organization to still be using this word and this phrase DEI that's so charged in this environment? So we have to be able to speak up on behalf of our employees. So all of the kind of different people, especially I'm here in the LA area, so our campus community is made up of a lot of different people, to make sure they feel welcomed and included, and that we recognize that diverse viewpoint. And so what do we do? And we're going to get into that a little bit later about what does it mean to really speak up and be an advocate in your workplace.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. We really appreciate you sharing your thoughts. Next, I would like to invite Marisa to share a little bit about herself, along with the topic that she's assigned to share.
Thank you so much, Monica, and this amazing team, this amazing collective, which I'm so proud to be part of. I'm Marisa Stoltzfus. I am an HROD executive, currently serving as the Senior Director for Talent and Organizational Development at Sierra Pacific Engineering and Products in Long Beach. I have been in HR over 30 years now. I'm almost embarrassed to say that, but I'm so excited to say that because I finally feel like I know what I'm doing. As an HROD leader, I also support Management Cues, which is an amazing training organization led by one of our other speakers today, Dr. Mayra Austin. I am the co-lead with Stephanie of the council as an affairs strategist, and as a first-generation graduate and workplace culture practitioner, I am excited to talk to you about belonging, the B in ABC. If we could progress to the next slide. The sense of belonging is something that's really near and dear to me, having lived in the electric utility industry for 20 years and the last 10 in the throes of deregulation, where there were constant reorganizations, and from year to year, you didn't know if you would have your job. And so that sense of belonging really showed up for me personally, because you know, my concern was, oh my gosh, will I not have a place to go to tomorrow, right? And so, you know, this is all about a very natural human need that we all have. Belonging to a community of others is an emotional connection that is crucial for ensuring engagement, creativity, retention, the overall success of an organization. I could go on and on about all the research that's out there, but belonging is really about addressing the emotional experience of employees, whether they feel accepted, respected, valued, and integral to the group that they work with side by side. Now, we know that this emotional connection is critical, yet it's different for each individual. So, how can we create that sense of belonging? Where do we start? Well, the challenge of winning people's hearts starts with a rally. Dr. Anita mentioned it in her introductory comments. Leaders need to build trust, starting with a vision for others to follow, a purpose for people to believe in, and the core values by which people demonstrate that they're along for the ride. So to inculcate the vision, the mission, and values of an organization is to incorporate what a company says it believes. And you incorporate those into the programs, policies, practices, and protocols of a business. This is not an easy thing to do. And yet we see it play out so brilliantly in many companies. So this is a critical step to bringing people together and to developing that sense of belonging. Representation is also a very obvious way we can show that people belong. What may not be obvious, however, are the gifts that people bring. So let's boast about what others bring to the table. In knowing and speaking to people's strengths and leveraging those strengths, we help individuals and their colleagues see the value they bring when sometimes it's not obvious. And the best advice I can give our audience on the topic of belonging is to think about athletics, right? When people are on a team, they play to their strengths, they have each other's backs. They'll even take a hit if it benefits the team and gets them to the winner's circle. So what can your business learn from that? And how can you apply that concept? When people come together for a common cause, use their strengths and work together, you have belonging. And belonging is absolutely magical.
Well said, Marisa. Thank you so much. And I just love your passion around belonging. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. Would love to introduce Amber to share a little bit about herself as well as the topic of culture.
Thank you, Monica. And it's such a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you, Dr. Anita, for the invitation and the little story behind how we got together. I think everything happens for a reason. So I'm really excited to be here. My name is Amber Arnold. I am the head of DEI and Impact Communications at Mike Worldwide, or MWW for short. We are a full-service independent PR and communications agency. So in my role, I serve as a strategic counselor to global brands, nonprofits, organizations, really who seek to use communications as a key strategy to foster inclusive cultures, drive social impact, and build a positive reputation. I also oversee our company's internal DEI council and employee resource groups. These forums create safe spaces for our colleagues, and we turn a lot of the stories and experiences that we share in these groups into valuable insights for our business and for our clients as well. And finally, I bring my experiences in thought leadership to graduate students at Columbia University's Master's in Strategic Communications program, of which I'm an alum, as well as to several other PR industry group associations. And I love all things language and culture. So I am a trained linguist and cultural anthropologist, and I bring that training to my work every day. And I think that's a great segue into the third pillar that represents the ABC, which is culture. And the way I define culture is really the shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that influence how an organization or a group of people behave. And in a work setting, culture is shaped by its leadership and its employees. So it's really important that it's positive, and that there is strong engagement. There was a recent study conducted by SHRM at the end of last year, and the organization identified 5 key elements that are universally linked to having a positive work culture. And those included having honest and unbiased management who lead by example and set the tone at the top. 2, treating everyone fairly through civil behavior, right? Being um, respectful regardless of your background or identity. 3, providing meaningful and purpose-driven work opportunities, as well as leadership opportunities, potentially outside of work as well within the communities that they live in and serve. 4, creating safe forums for open dialogue and communication. And then finally, being empathetic and having the ability to put yourself in others' shoes to really understand and support them. And so when you think about all of these key elements together, diversity, equity, inclusion is a really important aspect of building a positive work culture. And I'll be talking a little bit about how organizations and business leaders can help use communications to foster that inclusive environment.
Thank you so much, Amber, for sharing all of those great insights around culture. And then next, I would like to invite Dr. Mayra to join us and share a little bit more about the reset of the ABC Collective and our movement.
Thank you so much. It is such a joy and privilege to be able to round this out with such an amazing panel. So a little bit about myself. I'm Dr. Mayra Austin. I have over 20 years of experience in operations and management. And so I am uniquely passionate. I tend to nerd out on management all by itself and workforce equity. And so I'm a little bit newer to the ABC Collective. So I'm bringing a splash of operations to the mix, which I'm really excited to do and activate what we're talking about today. So Management Cues is a neuroscience-based training approach to learning in the workforce. And so that's how we're unique. I'm also a professor in the School of Business at Westcliff University at the undergrad and graduate level. And I am I think, newly added, right, Strategic Insights Advisor. And so I am also first generation Latina, daughter of immigrant parents, a business owner, first time doctor. And I always joke and say first time everything, right? So I kind of have that impact in my family. So that's a little bit about me. And today I'm really going to focus on just bringing it all together, a little bit from everybody that has been shared. I think that part of what makes this webinar really special that we're feeling out there right now. So I don't know if we have next slide on this one. So just to speak a little bit to that, part of what I really enjoy doing in my career is taking these great concepts, taking these great lessons and embedding them in action. And so really what we're talking about is integrating equity into operational workflows, right? We want to talk about impact and outcomes so we can move away from performative type of context and really pay attention to what's really happening. We're talking about equipping teams with real tools to navigate complex and cross-cultural interactions, right? Moving past anything that's holding us back and replacing those performative gestures with measurable and high impact actions that ripple throughout the organization. At Management Q specifically, we take a special approach to measuring what the experience is like. I think that that's part of the focus we need to bring to the table, and not worry so much about context and getting it perfect, but more so really getting a feel for what is actually happening. And most critically, building the skills, the awareness, identifying and interrupting bias, right? Getting in front of it and really getting a feel for it. In hiring, delegation, evaluations, and promotions, the activities that take place, moving past even training and development, even moving past the concept and word of merit, but seeking transformation, right? And so this ABC reset, I think, is really powerful because it's us taking what's happening and activating versus standing still, and really thinking about what's actionable, what's repeatable, what's realistic, what's doable in the workforce, and not being scared of it, but stepping into it. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll leave you with this. Sometimes it's making it simpler. Sometimes it's not overthinking it and moving past whatever holds us back. So it's redirecting, right? So this is a reset, realignment movement. It's us not sitting in fear, right? So model authentic leadership through consistent and culturally aware behaviors. Establish accountability systems that reinforce fairness. And if it's fair, guess what? It's inclusive, right? It's just that simple sometimes. And sometimes we tend to overcomplicate it. So I think it's establishing systems where you're clear on what is being measured so that you're not focusing necessarily on the people, but the outcome. And maybe that makes it easier, right? And designing and scaling, I think that looking at the design behind what we do is moving beyond policy. As an operator, I can tell you that's where my passion lies. Interpretation of policy and protocol, and make it a lived experience where we shift things from defining to being, because that's what it means to really belong. That's what it means to be inclusive. And that's what culture really means, right? It's who we are. And last, but certainly not least, and I can't even help myself, it's my favorite part, auditing. I know that's not that fun, but it helps us quantify, qualify, and ensure that what we're doing is actually working, right? Because that's what makes it not performative. So it's, again, developing a rhythm of continuous improvement and regularly auditing, knowing what to look for. And I think that's where we get scared, where we don't know exactly what we should be looking for. And that I know for a fact, Amber is going to bring some of that great insight to us today in terms of what should we do, what should we look for, and not have our questions hold us back or continue to make us fearful of what it looks like to be equitable in the workforce. So with that said, I'll leave you with this thought. The reset is powerful because it's actionable. Right? We're moving past just saying it. It's measurable, and most importantly, it works. Right? So I'll go ahead and leave you with that. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you, Dr. Mayra. Well said. Next slide, please. All right, so everyone, we are ready to get started with our panel discussion. And we have a set of questions that we've already prepared. Just from what we've heard from the community in terms of how people are thinking on the topic of DEI, we prepared these questions, but I also want to encourage the audience that if any other questions come to mind or anything that's just burning that you really want to hear from the panelists on, we have the Q&A feature available for you to go in and submit the questions. And then we have Marc here who's monitoring the questions. And so I'll pause and I'll ask him if any questions have come up that we can ask the panelists as well. But as we're waiting for you to submit your questions, I will go ahead and ask the panelists questions. And given Amber is our expert in the area of DEI and communications, I definitely want to target Amber for a few of these questions as well. Actually, if you could pull up slide 16 for us real quick, because I also want to let the audience know that the questions that we are going to be covering today, we've broken them down into 3 different subject matter areas. First, having the DEI conversation. We understand like people are unclear on, should we be talking about it? Should we not be talking about it? So we thought that that would be an area that we want to dig a little bit deeper in. And then just acknowledging the fact that we are in a different landscape. It has really shifted. And what does that mean? What does that look like now? And how should we be moving forward? And then last is HR strategy. Like, how does that change? What does that look like now? And looking at it from a risk balance DEI messaging. I mean, we've seen with a number of companies the negative impact that's taking place on their businesses. So we wanted to talk a little bit more about the HR strategy when it comes to that. So we'll be asking questions along those lines. But again, you're not limited to asking questions on those topics. Whatever comes to mind, feel free to ask questions on. Thank you so much. We could take the slide down. Just wanted to walk the audience through that too. So first question for the panelists. You know, some people, actually a way to ground us all is around how do we define DEI today? Because some people define DEI as just strictly, you know, about race, ethnicity, age, gender, but it's more than that. So I wanted to start just grounding, getting us all on the same page of like, how do we define what DEI is today?
And I'm happy to kick us off, Monica. Thank you. For me, when I break down each of the letters and the concepts, they all represent something different, right? So diversity, simply put, is about human difference. And really across societies and cultures, there are a few main ways that we define differences among, you know, human beings. And you mentioned a couple of them: age, race, gender, age. But there are additional ones as well, you know, from your socioeconomic background, your faith, neurodiversity. These are all aspects of diversity. And so when you think about how some of the framing of DEI is today, it has become weaponized a little bit. And so we have to think about, go back to the basics. What do we mean around diversity in a strictest sense? We are all very different. So that is diversity. Equity is about being fair and creating fair access, opportunity, and advancement for everyone. Not everyone has the same starting point, right? And so it's important that in the business sense, organizations and leaders remove some of those barriers that can help level the playing field and people have the same opportunity to reach the same outcomes. And then finally, inclusion for me means that everyone contributes. So you can have diversity within an organization, but if people are not engaging, then the full benefit and value of DEI does not come to life. So DEI to me is, you know, people think kind of single-mindedly about it, but when you break down each of the words and the concepts, they are interdependent, but they are very different in nature. So that's how I would define each of those.
Thank you, Amber.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything to share?
I want to add to that. I take it back to those lessons we learned in kindergarten, where we all learned to like respect our differences, our similarities, and create a fair environment. I started learning those lessons actually in preschool. You know, and no matter what we label it, like Amber said, DEI has gotten a bad rep, but when you break it down to those three words, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's hard to argue against those things.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think with diversity, you want to look around your workplace and go, does everybody look like me? Does everybody think like me or have the same background as me? If so, I have work to do. How is it that, you know, we are excluding a lot of people, especially if you're in LA? Like, you should have a lot of different people because LA is made up of so many different kinds of people. And I think even the inclusion thing, like something really easy we do here at the Skirball is we translate a lot of our written materials, like policies, handbook, our town hall meetings are simultaneously translated because we have a lot of employees whose first language is Spanish. And a lot of them have some English, but I want to ensure that they're going to understand everything. I want to ensure that when they get that handbook, they understand what all those policies mean. Those are very easy things. Like Dr. Mayra was talking about, like when you do that audit, you'll probably find there's some easy things that you can adjust to make sure that your workplace is inclusive. Are your employees who are in a wheelchair or who have mobility issues able to easily navigate the office? That's an inclusion issue. And I don't think any of us would argue against that. So that's what, when people push back a little bit on what DEI is, I say it's about making better workplaces. It's not about just automatically trying to check boxes. If you're trying to check boxes, you're not doing DEI right.
Monica, if I may jump in here really quickly and share a thought. I see a question here, and forgive me if I'm jumping ahead, but I feel like I need to say something. Talking about discussing strategies for dealing with leaders who have a strong negative emotional reaction to woke DEI directives. What I have been sharing with my clients is this. It's much more important to be able to deliver a message that will be received than to deliver a message that we feel is right. Regardless of the rightness of your message, if you don't deliver it in a way in which it can be received, it's never going to be heard. So if we focus on meeting people where they are, delivering a message that they can receive from their perspective, the rightness of that message that you feel like you're delivering will eventually sink in. So that's my thought about that. People have emotional reactions because this is their personal belief system that they may have been raised with, or based on a one-time interaction with someone that has been reinforced in their mind. And so to go in and tell people that they're wrong never works. How does anyone feel when we're told we're wrong? But if we're given the opportunity to hear a message that would resonate with us so that we can come to our own conclusions and then perhaps change our behaviors, I have found that that is the more effective way to do it. Being intentional about delivering a message that can be received versus being insistent that we are delivering a message that is right. Thank you, Monica.
Excellent point. Thank you so much, Dr. Anita. I really appreciate you sharing your perspective on that. Anyone else from the panel want to share your definition of DEI or how you view it? Okay, then I'll move on to the next question. A number of you kind of shared, misconceptions of DEI that you see. What would you say is the biggest misconception that you see today?
There are a couple for me, Monica. There isn't just one. And I think we hit on one earlier that one misconception is that DEI benefits only racial or gender minorities, right? I think sometimes DEI is a trigger word for race or gender. And so people's mind only go there when they hear the word. And so there's a little bit of unlearning that needs to happen with DEI. And to Dr. Anita's point, I really do think it's important to call people in a little bit more, because I think that when there are negative reactions to DEI, it's based on specific information that is being fed to them. And it may not be coming from the most inclusive source, or may only be coming from just one group. And you have to think about, going back to how we define diversity, that broad range of identities that make up who we are. It's everybody in this. DEI benefits everyone. And so we can't get caught up on pointing the finger at one group, or focusing only on one identity. That work is important. Having cohort specific work is important, but it's not the only. So that's one misconception. The second one I wanted to address is around DEI being at odds with merit. Absolutely not, right? DEI does not lower standards. The goal of DEI is actually to enforce meritocracy and widen the talent pool. And so the work around DEI is really meant to remove those systemic barriers so that more talent can pursue an opportunity or demonstrate their skill sets. And there have been a number of studies that show that, underrepresented or underserved groups are often overlooked for positions that they are equally qualified for. And so that absolutely debunks this idea of DEI being at odds with merit. They go hand in hand and they actually reinforce one another. And then a final one, then I'll stop, is that DEI is like a one-off program. While DEI may surface as an initiative or program in an organization, it should still be a long-term commitment for an organization that is based in your values as a company, and sort of what your mission is as an organization. And so it's easy to go after one aspect of a program. And if you know, as you're seeing in today's environment, there are tweaks that are being made to programs, and, you know, there's people get a slap on the wrist if they're changing things and there's not a deeper understanding of what the actual initiative is from a broader standpoint or from a business value perspective. So those are some myths around DEI that, if you read some anti-DEI narratives, kind of reinforce these misconceptions and push people further into trying to distance themselves from it. And so again, we have to try and work together to unlearn some of those narratives and put forward what the real work is all about.
Awesome. Any other misconceptions?
Can I piggyback on Amber's insights? So interestingly enough, Amber, I was just going over with my students the paradox of meritocracy, right? And so I think that is something that complements what Amber is saying, and to look at it from an operations perspective, right? Part of what makes maybe people move into this phase of, is it merit or is it DEI, and makes it feel like it's at odds, is that we don't understand the role of merit within DEI. Where we go wrong is we don't know how to measure it. So when we stop measuring it, what happens is we're not challenging assumptions. That's the issue. That's where we leave it at performative. That's exactly it. And it's so important what Amber just shared. And so because my entire life, I feel like I've been taking policy protocol and theory and putting it into action, that's the conduit that's missing. And to not go down the rabbit hole into operations language, and put it into more softer, more real terms. If you don't know how to measure it, you're not quite there yet. So maybe let's start by, how do we measure that and align merit with DEI?
Excellent points. Thank you. Well, Amber, would love to get your thoughts here on this. And this is going to, acknowledging the shifting landscape that we're in today. What trends are you seeing in corporate DEI space right now?
Yeah, absolutely. With my clients, there are a few things happening. I'm sure many of you all are familiar or are part of some of that work, but one of the big ones is the changing terminology around DE&I, right? So now people are saying DEI or DEI by any other name, right? Because the mission and goal of it is still the same, right? But how we go about it may need to evolve in the current environment, and language is a very strong way to do that. And so for some clients, I am working with them on how to communicate their commitment without overcorrecting what their initiative is. Because I think the mistake that some businesses have made is they got scared with the legal component of it before doing a whole risk assessment and just jumped into changing it and forgot that they have internal stakeholders and shareholders who are like, uh-oh, what is this? And so across the board, I think like language is an important trend that is that I'm continuing to see, whether it's changing the name of DEI programming within organizations, or trying to kind of remove themselves from using the term DEI. Another trend I'm seeing is that companies are turning internal. And so, this is kind of a shift from what I've seen in my work in the last 5 years. Like 5 years ago, there was a big push for companies to vocally, publicly, externally show their support, right? Oftentimes not even communicating that internally first, and then they had employees come out and say, what, really? Like, we didn't know that, or that it actually was at odds with what they were saying publicly. But now there is that bigger focus on, how do my employees feel? How do our investors and customers and consumers feel? Because that is the reputation play. And we've seen this play out in very public ways with some big companies, right, who have come out 5 years ago with a big stance and now are reversing track and didn't do it well. And so I think companies are being a little bit more quiet externally, but focusing on their internal and employee communications, which I know many HR professionals here are in charge of. But one thing I do want to note that we do see play out in the media too is that, any sort of internal comms can become external. So even for private companies who aren't trying to be so vocal on DE&I right now, if you're writing a memo to your employees, it can be leaked to the press. And so whatever you say internally, you got to mean it. It can't just be, saving face. It has to stand, whether it's internal or external, because then that will lead to my other trend, which is employee and consumer activism. So, I think employees and consumers have played a very critical role around how companies are coming out with their stance. And if companies are not in conversation with their employees around what resonates with them, to your point, Dr. Anita, say what resonates versus what's right, then they're going to feel like you've turned their back on them, or that they don't feel safe, and they will be very vocal about that. And so employee and consumer activism, while it has it's changed a little bit from the last 5 years, but it is still very front and center when you look at how companies are making a stance on DEI right now. And I'm going to pause there. I had another thought, but I don't want to talk too long. Go ahead.
I have something to add to that, Amber, because I also think I had a really good conversation with a colleague actually this morning about how everyone, when something big happens in the world, there's always this tendency of like, how do I make a public statement?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's becoming more and more important to me to center as an HR leader, number one, how is this going to affect the employees that I serve?
Yes.
And what are the things that we're doing internally to bolster our community? Last week at a town hall, our CEO, Jesse Kornberg, made the statement of like, in light of everything that's happening in this world right now, we're not changing who we are.
Mm-hmm.
We're still holding tight to our values, and we're going to continue to hold on to those things as a point of stability. And that's, the core value of the Skirball is welcoming the stranger and creating an inclusive environment where conversations happen. So we're living and breathing this. It doesn't matter whether we call it DEI, whether we call it a spirit of welcoming or whatnot. And so I ask you to kind of go back to your organization and look internally. Stop thinking about what am I going to post on LinkedIn? How am I going to change my logo for Pride Month or whatever that is? And what am I doing internally to make all these different groups of people feel like they belong to this community? And Dr. Anita, I've been listening to your podcast a lot, and you started this webinar that way, welcome community.
Yes.
And what are we doing to build that community internally first? Because like you said, Amber, things are if it's all internal communication, it's going to get out. Your employees are going to post it on social media or post it anonymously on Reddit or Glassdoor or whatever it is. So at some point, it stops mattering if you have the logo, if you have just the statement, if you're not living and breathing that every day when you go to work.
That's right. And it reminds me of something that my mom used to say all the time. Charity begins at home and spreads abroad. You got to treat home right first before you can possibly treat anyone else right.
And I would say this is a moment for employee resource groups. If your organization has it, have them. They are being leveraged right now across a number of organizations in a very important way. Yes, your ERG should be open to everyone, but it is okay to have a cohort specific focus so that different issues that impact employees, in nuanced ways can come to the fore and the organization can address it. So employee resource groups are another important resource for organizations right now as a way to connect with employees and communicate with them. And you saying abroad, Dr. Anita, also made me think about a trend of putting DEI on the global stage, right? So I do think that, yes, even 5 years ago, after the murder of George Floyd, the concept of DEI catapulted, right, across the nation and even globally. And now we're seeing sort of that retreat happening now. But globally, especially for multinational companies, the conversation around the value and benefit of DEI very front and center. And so when thinking about how a business operates and the various stakeholders they have across regions, we can't just say, oh, in the US or in the Americas, we're going to turn off this message, but then still have it here. You have to stay consistent and stand in that. And if you align that with your values, then you shouldn't have any issues.
Excellent. Well, so on that note, what are some best practices that you recommend in the DEI space today?
Yes, I think it's important to stay on top of the evolving landscape. I know that might be a little overwhelming because there's so much news to consume, so many new updates and changes happening every week, every other day even. But make sure you're staying on top of the landscape and assess how that is impacting your key stakeholders. So you can do that through these internal engagements and safe spaces, like with employee resource groups. You can do more formal audits. I believe, all organizations have gone through these compliance and legal risk reviews to kind of figure out what their risk appetite will be. And that is important. And that is something that should continue on. But if you are making any adjustments with your messaging, I would say a few things. One, do not overcorrect your commitment. I think that, saying you support DE&I is not illegal, okay? But understand what the law says, what the anti-discrimination laws are. The executive orders around DE&I have not created any new laws or anything like that. But understand how they are being used to maybe weaponize. And so make sure your language is aspirational and non-binding in nature, because that is really important. If you have somewhat of like a quota, or we will do this, or we will ensure that, that could be legally risky, and you would need to adjust your messaging. And then again, connect it to your values and your innovation and growth as a business, because that is undisputed. DEI is good for business, and if your numbers are showing that, it's hard to dispute that. And a number of company leaders have come out and done that very well. So those are a couple that I have.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have any other best practices to share?
Unfortunately, time has gotten away from us because the conversation was so good. I think we need to have our panelists share their final thoughts, and then Amber is going to give us a takeaway before I share my closing thoughts and send us all home. Panelists.
I can start. My final thoughts are going to be really simple this time around. Get really curious. If you aren't comfortable saying, let's have a DEI conversation, don't say it. Just say, let's get curious about how we're communicating. Let's get curious about what we love and what we hate. And start with the basics. And then lastly, I'll say this. One thing that Amber said that stands out to me and always stands out in dialogue is the distinctions that we make. With my own teams at Management Cues, Marisa knows this. She's done it alongside me as well. Making distinctions is crucial to not falling into assumption or rhetoric. So even understanding a distinction as simple as the power that an executive order has over actual enacted legislation can empower you and show you what you are actually in compliance with or out of compliance. Don't let the media tell you what that distinction is. Get really personal with it, and you'll be better for it.
Mm.
Yes.
I have a very quick closing thought. Don't stop doing the work.
Mhm.
Just stay focused and know that your work, your company, your community will evolve.
Yes.
I'd add, engage with your HR community. This ABC Collective is a really good example of that. Because there's a lot of people doing that work that are having different struggles, and it's so powerful to share the resources with each other because it's only going to make our workplaces stronger.
I would say diversify your news sources or where you find information. I love, Dr. Mayra, that you said go beyond the media headlines. There are a number of organizations that are like tracking and reporting on what companies are saying, how they're going about it, what those results will be, or what those outcomes have been. And so we'll be sharing some resources with you all after this, but that's definitely an important one. Diversify your sources of news.
Monica, I know you have been busy as our moderator, but I definitely want to get your thoughts. And Marc and Patty, I know you're playing specific roles, but you're part of this collective. I want to hear your thoughts too before we wrap up, please. Monica.
Thank you, Dr. Anita. Sophia, would you mind bringing up slide 18? My final thoughts is, in order for businesses to be effective, it really takes engagement from the people. And in order to get the most out of your people and for them to be clear on what's expected and to really give their all in the mission of the company, they have to feel like they belong there. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, one of the key aspects of it, number 3, is love and belonging. And people tend to think that that doesn't belong in business, but if you've got humans working for you, it does. And so I just really want to encourage business leaders, just please keep that in mind, the importance of belonging and just taking the time to make sure in all the decisions that are being made and the approaches that you take, that you're thinking about how can I ensure that people feel that sense of belonging and that they feel included in part of the team to accomplish the mission that you want to achieve.
Patty, Marc.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Anita. For me, one of the most important things, I think, is the fact that inclusion is more than a value. It's a strategic imperative that shapes thriving workplaces. As HR leaders navigating a time of growing scrutiny around DEI and B, as we've heard today, we are called to lead with clarity, with courage, and with conviction. And this is our moment to reaffirm our commitment to elevate our impact and to move forward with purpose, which is what this collective is going to do, is charged with doing, and is going to be inviting the community to come forward with us.
Thanks, Patty. Marc, last but not least, what messages do you want to send us home with today?
Thank you, Dr. Anita. I would share one recent conversation that I had with colleagues who have asked me what we're doing differently at my company, which happens to be a Dutch-owned, Netherlands-driven organization with a large presence in the US. And I was incredibly proud to share, similar to what Stephanie said earlier, that our CEO, when asked that question, responded literally to the entire nearly 50,000 employees and said, we're not going to bend to the rhetoric of conversation that's going on right now. We have always built our values and our business on diversity and inclusion. It's what's made us strong and successful and innovative, and we will continue along that very path. And so I thought that language of we're not going to bend to rhetoric, we're going to focus on what has made us great and will continue to make us greater. It's just an amazing and powerful message that I'm very proud to hear from a CEO.
Thank you for sharing that, Marc. I think that's a strong story to end on. And as we transition to our last two slides, I want to remind you that we do have a survey. We want to hear your feedback. We want to know how well we are serving you, and specifically around this message of an HR strategy for risk-balanced DEI messaging. Please give us your comments on the survey. In particular, we want to know what you liked, what you learned, and most importantly, how you will lead yourself and your teams differently as a result of this webinar. My last thought is a summary of the key takeaways. Marc, your story reminds me that it sounds like diversity is in the DNA of your organization, and I love that. My summary of the key takeaways that we have heard is this: retiring the term and rewiring the work of advocacy, belonging, and culture by defining, aligning, and operationalizing belonging simply and sustainably means if it's fair, it's inclusive. And finally, I want to leave you with a quote. We have no idea who said it, but we felt it was resonating with our collective. Culture isn't what you say, it's what you champion, protect, and practice every day. And on that note, we want to end with a picture of what we at the ABC Collective feels like inclusion looks like. Thank you so much for joining us for this very special event. I want to thank all of the panelists, all of the folks behind the scenes. This was absolutely a collective effort. Amber, thank you so much for being our special guest. And with that, community, we give you back 3 minutes in your day. Thank you so much. And remember, this is Dr. Anita reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real. Good job, everybody.
I agree. That was outstanding. I learned so much. I was taking notes as I was going.
Wasn't that some good stuff? Woo-wee, that was some good stuff.
Yes.
And I just
Amber-
realized, my apologies, that my final thoughts were supposed to be my slide, but then I kind of went out of order there. But thank you for calling it up, Monica, and having it on the screen. I appreciate it.
Such good information. I wanted to make sure people saw it.
Thank
And if
you.
Monica hadn't called it up, I was going to. Yes. And that's going to be on our website somewhere on our resources as soon as we get all that worked out. Sophia, again, thank you so much for helping us drive the presentation. We appreciate you very much. Steph, Amber, Monica, thank you. Could not have done it without you.
I copied and pasted the HRCI and SHRM codes. I'll send them out with the email.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, y'all.
Thank you.
And
so
Amber,
much,
you and I will
Amber.
be talking soon, yes?
Yes, we will. That's
Okay.
right.
Take care, everybody.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.